So I debated about making this episode, and I think I made it too complicated up here, and I put it off, honestly, because I was like, I didn't know how to do this because no one's ever done this in my family. Who am I? What is the name of this podcast? And my entire story is going to be in this episode. Let's start with my name. My name is Sarah Chan. To be incredibly specific, my name is Sarah Yun Ling Chan. That is my full name. Born in the beautiful city of New York, raised in Central Jersey, actually 20 minutes from the Jersey Shore. I grew up in Monmouth and Ocean County, New Jersey. I am a six-figure business owner, along with a podcast host, and soon to be actually community host as well. Still working out the details on that. That will be coming later on, probably this year, if not next year. My story is one that if you don't got thick skin, this episode, you gotta go out now. Like if you don't got thick skin or you're very sensitive to mental health struggles, this is not an episode that you should probably be watching. So my childhood, like I said, I grew up in Central Jersey. I'm born and raised in the northeastern coast, in between the states of New York and New Jersey. Um, Grew up in a town called Jackson, New Jersey. During my childhood, I grew up with a lot of dysfunction. I come from a broken home. Parents got divorced at 12, and I was bullied to death in school. Made fun of because I'm half Chinese and I'm half Puerto Rican. And then on top of it, I was not the greatest in school. I know my parents blew a fortune trying to get me professionally tutored because my grades were horrendous in school. Ironically enough, I read content professionally, which is the funny thing in all of this, but we'll get to that part. Um, and I struggled academically very, very hard. I thought my parents thought that I had some sort of attention deficit disorder because I couldn't focus in school. I had reading comprehension issues in school. I went to speech as a kid, um, bullied horrifically. Most days, I would say, as a kid, I sat alone at lunch. Seriously. Um, and that was basically my existence from basically until college. A lot of it, yeah. Um, I didn't have many friends, and I definitely didn't get invited to all the parties, right? That kids get invited to. Um, and that was okay. I think that portion, when I look back at 26 now, I think that that forged me in the independence that I needed to have for entrepreneurship. So I stuck out like a definitely like a sore thumb. But in school, while I may not have understand like English well, um, I understood math, and I was very smart in math. Always at the top of my grade in math. Um, Very smart in arithmetic and very, very quick to calculate numbers. Um, I was also very smart in how to actually pattern recognition as well, which leads me further down the line to figure out how high of an IQ that I do have. And during the time in which I was a child, while coming home from school to screaming matches between my parents, I also understood that I was like, this is this the normal, right? Like kids go through. I understood that I didn't have a very normal childhood compared to some other people. Like you would see like a lot of their parents show up for like Parents' Day and like all this other stuff, but like kind of didn't have that. It was odd to see one of my parents show up and the other one would not, meaning my father would not show up because just like me, my dad is actually an entrepreneur as well. So my dad was off building out his business and putting food on the table, and my mom was always the one um, showing up for everything. But they had an insanely toxic marriage, therefore got divorced at 12. So I learned independence very early on and how to be by myself and how to kind of be in my own bubble, I guess, very young. Um, Especially with being bullied, I had a very early sense in the world for how cruel people could get. And I think that forged me into a person where now I look back and I think I have a very deep desire to maintain honesty and loyalty and trust in a society where we are so separated and far apart from each other. And I think that a more part of the mission too now is to bring that sense of unity back to a world where we have completely and utterly fucked that one up for sure. But that's my childhood. So, not pretty, very lonely, and completely ostracized and alone for the majority of the time. Uh, it created a sense of hyper independence that was not and should not be the standard for any child, and certainly will not happen with my future family. Around 10 years old, I got into martial arts. My parents put me in martial arts, and I learned the beautiful thing in the word called discipline when I was a child. And I think if any parent is considering putting their kids in martial arts, I think that's a brilliant idea. Seriously. Um, Martial arts taught me a sense of honor, respect, integrity, and a level of discipline that even most adults don't have, which is pathetic, but we'll get there to how my business brain now thinks. So, and then from the ages of 10 to 14, I was in martial arts, and then I was inspired by my older brother to join the swim team in high school, in which my I spent my entire high school career swimming like laps and swimming on a competitive team all throughout high school from freshman to senior year. And in high school was the same. That's when I think I started understanding school a little bit better. Um, I don't think I struggled as much academically in high school. I don't think I was professionally tutored. I struggled my SAT. I think I got like an 8, like a 920 on my SATs out of 1600. And the only way that I knew I was going to get to college was through athletics. So I took swimming very seriously. Um, and I swam sprints. So I sprinted the 50 yard and the 100-yard freestyle. And my times were very, very good to get into college, actually. So much so that I got selected for NCAA Division Two, not Division Three. I got selected for Division Two. That was the only NCAA school I actually wanted to go because it gave me money for swimming. So if anybody's considering swimming and or playing baseball, playing football in college, you cannot get a sports scholarship for any sport if you are going to play Division 3. It is only Division 2 and Division 1 that is able by the National Collegiate Athletics Association, which stands for the NCAA, to get money to actually play the sport of your choice. Little did I know going into college that I tore my shoulder in high school. And that's why still to this very day, I still have issues with my shoulder. Um, but I swam all through out high school and I got to college, I swam too. Um, High school was okay. I moved in with my dad and stepmom, and I'll get to that part of my story too. But growing up in high school, people were still very cruel in school. I had rumors made up about me that were not true. I was mocked for even thinking of the thought that I could swim in college, which is very rare. It is very hard to get drafted for swimming when you've only swam potentially 3 years competitively and you're going to get drafted for an NCAA program. Very, very hard. So it takes normally 10 years to even qualify for times for at least Division 2. So the fact that I did it in 3 years was unheard of. And swimming was a way where, and I think still to this very day, fitness has always been a very big part of my life. Swimming at a black line for literally for hours every freaking week and easily swimming 10 miles a week taught me that life is hard and sometimes your life is going to look like a black line on the bottom of a pool. That it's going to get monotonous and boring, and there are going to be times in your life that are hard, but you just got to keep, I guess, swimming. Got to keep floating somehow. Life doesn't stop because of the fact that it gets hard. You just do it, right? So swimming was a very big portion of my life, and I look back on that those years of my life, and I absolutely love the sports. I have no regrets. Loved what I did. Um, and that was the only sport I played in high school. I swam, so I dedicated all of my focus onto one sport and getting me out of this shitty ass town that I grew up in. And then college came around. So where did I go from college? Growing up in obviously central New Jersey, which exists, by the way, so let's get that shit straight. Growing up in central Jersey, I went to school in New Hampshire. I thought Jersey was cold. New Hampshire is a hell of a lot colder. And this is where the story takes a turn. I was originally sent to college on half of a ride. Unheard of. Because I took no AP classes in high school. I took no honors classes in high school. And I still somehow graduated with like a 3.4 GPA from high school. And I still went away to college with half a ride. So that gives everybody hope out there, whoever's applying to college right now or thinking about going to college. That time in my life, oh God, I was getting blackout drunk. I was partying way more than I should have been and getting blackout drunk and doing whatever the fuck I wanted, honestly. And it was the first time that I'd been away from home for in forever, literally forever, away from any type of parental control, literally. And it was not the best choice. I don't think, and I look back on it now, and what I really wanted actually was to take a gap year between high school and college. And my dad and stepmom literally said, "No, you're going. You're going to college." I look back on that time in my life now, and I'm like, I wasn't ever ready, and I don't think I should have ever went to college, to be quite honest. And I think I still would have shown up fine because college was it was a blessing, but it was a curse. So originally too, I forgot this detail. Originally, I actually wanted to do the Asian thing and go in and be a doctor. So I was already studying biology and with the intention to be pre-med and go to medical school. Didn't work out like that. Okay. So what happened was is I got accused of something that I didn't do and I got suspended with no proof. So I'm not going to say what the thing is because it doesn't really matter anymore, but there's a lot of colleges out there that will make up shit about you and take other kids' words before yours and will literally put you in a hearing to literally make you prove that you didn't do this, even though you didn't. Like you're going to court. Like I was some 19-year-old kid feeling like I'm the only one that's got literally no proof, and I feel like the cards are stacked against me, which they were. So, got suspended. I go home to New Jersey, and it was the first time that I realized that the system is not there to help you. Far from it. It will fuck you at any point that it can, literally. So if anybody's sitting here thinking that the government's gonna come and help you, wrong. You gotta forge your own path. Um, Still no proof that it didn't happen, that I was being accused of, and all my friends turned their backs on me in college. Like I had a lot of friends in college, partied with, uh, smoked weed in college, did all the things, and not a single one of them took my side. But I learned how fickle people can really be, along with, I think the biggest thing too I learned with that would be probably how ignorant people are to morality and defending your neighbor when they're being persecuted for something that they didn't do. Because I have done that, and I have defended somebody that was innocent in college as well. I think this probably plays a part of it too, that didn't do that what they were being accused of doing, and I was the only one that said something. So I'm sure that somehow pissed somebody off that I went out of my way to defend my friend, because I guess I have integrity. I don't like seeing people persecuted for things they didn't do. So I come home and I'm 19 and I have literally zero fucking clue what I wanted to do in my life. Sorry. So I decided I decided to go to business school. And I remember it was my first business class I'd ever took in college. When my professor sat to me and said, if you're not willing to take a risk, get the fuck out. She said it just like that. And I actually graduated with my business degree. It was single-handedly the best class. I think that made so much sense to me because studying for being pre-med was hard. Obviously, there's a lot of math and, you know, a lot of knowledge that you have to absorb. Um, but I always gravitated towards business. And I always knew I wanted to be my own business owner. Even when I thought I was going to be a doctor, I wanted to have my own practice, by the way. Um, so business school was good, but it wasn't accurate to the real thing. Far from it. What they do teach in business school is how to be a robot for the Matrix and teach you business principles that are 30 years outdated. So the only way that I got real business experience was actually working for my father. I helped him manage his $15 million company. It could be worth a hell of a lot more probably now, but at the time, I would like to think that he was probably doing right around, mm, company was probably worth yeah, probably right around 15 million if I had to guess. And all I remember is my dad was bringing home a lot of fucking money. And from that experience, I learned how to do inventory. I learned how to write emails. I knew how to talk to customers. I learned how to uh, work my ass off, and I actually learned how to start lifting weights actually in a warehouse because lifted boxes. And those boxes, when I was a 19-year kid, probably like, I don't know, like 140 pounds, like 90 pounds. So I started lifting boxes, and that's how I got to lifting too. And that experience was vital for me to understand the value of hard work. And I had worked for my dad for years beforehand. In high school, I was working for my dad already. I started working when I was like 14. Seriously, working when I was 14. And that's actually how I bought my first MacBook. As my dad paid for half of it, I actually worked for the other half. So I bought a refurbished MacBook Pro. And I remember that was the first big purchase as a teenager that I bought for myself. And I wanted a Mac, so I worked for it. And the value of hard work is lost in today's society. So obviously, I worked for my dad too, and I was in college. And when I came home to New Jersey, I went to Brookdale Community College and went through my associate's degree at Brookdale. And also at the time too, I also worked another job. I served tables. I learned how to serve in a restaurant and bartend. And that job taught me how to communicate because it didn't grow up in a house where I knew how. So instead of talking to people that I knew, it taught me how to talk to people that I didn't know. It is the most underrated sales job on the face of the fucking planet. Bartending and or serving tables is the most underrated sales job. It teaches you how to upsell. It teaches you how to communicate very, very effectively. And it also teaches you how to pair well with certain circumstances, right? Like a customer's taste may not be the same as your next table's taste. So you have to adapt as well and have good conversations. It also taught me how to multitask extremely well. It taught me that physical fitness is absolutely needed because in a single shift, I would literally check my Apple Watch and I did like, I don't know, 15,000 steps. Um, it was good. So I was basically working two jobs and going to school, basically full time. So I guess that's where my work ethic comes in. So naturally, right, with entrepreneurship, um, I learned the value of hard work. is where I got it from. So when I was very young, I was very used to make my own money and my independence and going to college and busting my ass. And once I moved from central New Jersey to Florida, I was, for the first year that I lived in Florida, I was still going to school. I actually did it remote instead. So after I graduated from Brookdale, I went to another school in Florida, a college, a 4-year college, and I studied online because the college was on literally on the other coast of Florida, which prepared me for what I do now, which is I work virtually. So I have a lot of discipline when it comes to this virtual world that I'm in. And so I worked full time, still in Florida. I had a job. And then excuse me, um, I worked and I went to school. So I did all my coursework online. So I graduated in 2023 with my BS, Bachelor's of Science in Business Administration. I graduated to no shock, graduated with a below a 3.0 GPA because even when I was working and going to school, I was still partying like no tomorrow. Went out to the bar, the club, Miami, everything. I was literally outside everywhere because I just didn't want to be home. Didn't want to be home. And I'll get to that. It's coming. And all the reasons why I didn't want to be home. So I was out. I was like hustling, partying, and doing all the things. And while I was making great money at serving and bartending in general, I knew that I liked sales and I had gotten fired from one job and I said, okay, well, I really don't know what to do. I don't know, I can't stay in the service industry. I kind of wanted to change, and that's when I got my job at Saks. So I worked at Saks Fifth Avenue for 8 months, and that was the best job I ever had. Best job. And little did 22-year-old me know that I was very, very good at sales, actually. I didn't always know, like, I knew that my sales would be very high in a restaurant. Like, I knew, like, whatever the average was, I knew mine were above it, but not to the degree of selling over $110,000 in 8 months. And that's how long I worked at Saks for. So I had no sales experience, no luxury experience at all, no retail experience at all. And I somehow, fucking skinny kid, got hired at one of the biggest luxury retailers in the whole world. And I sold 110,000 in 8 months. I tell this story because I still don't know how I did it. Personally, I had an incredible book of business, and my clients absolutely loved me. So much so I had their black cards on my cell phone. And at that job was where I learned the value of building your own book of business because they don't just hand, like when you work at Saks, they don't hand you, your clientele. You have to build that just like you're building a business, right? So that philosophy of building out my clientele for my counter, which I worked in fragrances, I was fragrance specialist. So once I built out my book of business, I took that experience into entrepreneurship. So that job actually trained me for entrepreneurship and how to build shit on my own. Um, no book of business, no experience, but I noticed that selling fragrances is actually not that far off from storytelling. So, what people don't understand about storytelling in general is when I talk about this, is most people, when they go to buy a fragrance, the perfumer normally ties a story into whatever fragrance that they're creating. Like, for prime example, if anybody's heard of Maison Francis Kurkdjian or Tom Ford, Chanel, Creed, Kilian Paris, there's specific fragrances that all have their own independent stories. And once I understood that, and I learned the power of storytelling naturally. And I got into selling fragrances, not even knowing what it was yet, not knowing what the word storytelling was. And I would just sell based off whatever they were feeling. And that's when I learned how, and I look back now, it's like I was really good at selling based off the feeling and what they wanted to experience versus these stupid features, which no one should be selling anyway. The features don't matter. But that's where I got my real sales skills from, is the restaurants I've worked in and literally literally working for a major retailer. And what did I take from my experience at Saks? Is that you're never too young to think that you can't do it or you need the experience. And a lot of people that work in the luxury retail space actually have been there for years, ironically enough. And I learned buyer psychology like very young before I think honestly it was being talked about. I learned buyer psychology. I learned the habits of my customers. I learned when they wanted to buy. Also, I wasn't up their ass either about how to buy. And I think that's probably why I did so well, is because I didn't bother my customers. My customers were multimillionaires and billionaires already. So I didn't do the whole follow-up thing. I just kind of left them alone. And when they were ready, they wanted something, they would text me. And that's what I told them from the very beginning. I was like, if you want something, just text me. I'm not here to send you 1,000 emails about a sale. I think that's stupid. That's how I ran my business, and that's why I did so well. Because yes, I understand the importance of a follow-up, but I also understand the importance of leaving people alone too. Like when they're not interested, right? So I learned how wealthy people thought too, that wealthy people in general, they don't ever think about the short-term outcomes. They don't even think about the futures. They think about how they're going to experience something in the long term. That's what wealthy people have taught me all over my years. And on top of that, the job was awesome. Paid like shit though, I won't lie, actually. Saks doesn't pay well, as far as their cosmetics is concerned. But the experience of being around people with money was really, really important for what I do now and how they think. But also, I met some of the most incredible mentors too. The person who hired me is a very good mentor of mine. I keep in contact with her still to this day. Um, the person who worked next to me in the next counter over is another incredible mentor to me as well. And so much so that I learned through her life story as well, from Albania to the United States and immigrating here to the US, and all throughout her life as a professional model and former pageant winner, former Miss Albania as well. So I understood that the art of being able to tell a story was really important. And then on top of it, too, like, just being a real human being is actually how you get very far in life. And she taught me a lot of lessons that I had never been taught in my whole life from nobody. And I think that's the arc of an incredible mentor. Is side note, when you find a mentor that believes in your vision more than you do, don't let that person go. Because if they're more delusional about you becoming the best version of you, you got lucky, dude. Seriously. That's the true arc of an incredible mentor, is them being absolutely delusional about where you want to go and discussing your goals. And then I met another friend of mine who's a mentor to me now, too, an incredible friend, and he had an incredible career in fashion as well, and worked at some of the biggest retailers such as Hermes and Louis Vuitton, and sold Birkin bags to celebrities. So I was around people that knew money too. And I think what I took from them is all the wisdom in order enough to forge your path forward in this whole game we call life, quite frankly. And after that, I got my degree and I got my job at as a GM of a Haagen-Dazs. I was managing a $750,000 store. Fucking hated that job with all my heart, and I got fired 10 weeks later after I got hired. Best thing that ever happened to me because 2 weeks afterwards, I started my business. At the time in which I started my business was the January of 2024. I was 24 at the age in which I started my business. And the way I decided to start a business was I wasn't I wasn't as big as I am into Christianity as I am now, right? Converting to Catholicism, which is what I'm doing right now. But I knew the only answer would be from God. And I was already contemplating it. Like, I was like, I absolutely hated the job. I didn't know what my next step forward was. And I was like, okay, well, I keep seeing this course online called The Real World made by Andrew Tate. And I was like, I don't know what to do here, but it's $50 and it's so cheap. And I went to church that weekend in Tampa, Florida, because I my friend was visiting from New Jersey, so went out all weekend long, and I told him that I was already like debating this, and I was like, the only answer I'm gonna get is if I go to church today. So he went with his boy, and I went with myself to church. I hopped in my car and I drove to church, and I sat there at a Catholic church, by the way, ironically enough, in Tampa, Florida, and the priest was talking about time. And I wish everybody was there because my mouth like dropped open. Like time as far as salvation is concerned. But I took it as time for you to take a leap of faith on yourself and just start a business. So bought the course literally that day. Like after church, hopped in my car, pulled out my credit card and bought it. Right. And then I went through all the learning modules and stuff like that, which Professor Andrew Bass is actually the copywriting professor inside the real world and is a great guy. And he teaches actually very well the psychology of how to write content to make sales happen. And after I got done with the course, I made the name, I made, all the things for it. I made a business card and all things, and the when I started prospecting, got my first client in 48 hours. And the rest is history. To this day, we are doing six figures. So it's year three now. That was 2 years ago. So I'm in year three right now. So we'll see what we do this year. But um, it was the best decision I ever made. I remember just calling a mentor of mine. I said, I fucking cannot stand working for somebody. I can't stand taking someone's orders that I think is dumber than me. And quite frankly, I felt like my entire life that I shouldn't be listening to anybody other than myself. Not to say that I kind of feel like I had an issue with authority, but I felt like I'm like, this is not something how I would do it. I do it completely differently. But I never got the credence and or the opportunity to do something my way. And I gave myself that. And SRQ copywriting was born. And ironically enough, my computer was absolutely broken. At the time, my screen was like, I don't know, I guess the internal display was shattered and I had to take it to Apple. And I used my sister's computer and I started my company off of her computer in a bedroom. It was the most I think that was the most nervous I'd been in a very long time. Despite going through everything prior in my life that I'd been through, right? Like getting suspended, moving to Florida, and then, which we're getting to is moving to Miami. You know, I don't think in my whole life that I've been felt more nervous than starting a business. Because for the first time in my life, I chose me when I wasn't choosing myself at all. I chose everyone else, right? And what everybody else wanted me to be because I naturally knew how to help people. I put a lot of people before me always. And I put myself first for the first time and I felt really good. And I put what I wanted. And it just led to a very hard season though. So I had explained, um, I had explained that I had a rough childhood. My parents are obviously divorced. Um, but I didn't have a very good relationship with my stepmom to a point where, and this is what I'll get to, I don't even know what to say, to a point where I don't hate her. I feel bad for her though, because of the amount of insecurity that this individual has. So at 14, I learned how to clean with a mop and a broom and all that stuff. You had to do my laundry already. My mom did all that stuff with me. But I would say in a 3,000 square foot home, two-thirds of that main floor I'd be cleaning by myself. I had that amount oof, of responsibility on my shoulders at such a very young age. And parts of her and my father chipped away at my self-confidence. So throughout the years, from 14 to 25, I would be very used to hearing that I was good for nothing, bad daughter. I was mentally unstable, worthless, useless. Just about every single name that you could possibly think of. And it ate at me as far as my self-confidence was concerned. And I think that's why I didn't even know how to believe in myself as far as starting a business was concerned. Because even when I was at Saks, I had a lot of long conversations with mentors, and I thought they were crazy for literally telling me that, no, you can do this. You've got this. You're smart enough. You're very bright. And yeah, I don't think that you know how bright you are. So I struggled a lot with my self-confidence as a young woman. And I never felt like I was enough, that I wouldn't measure up to his or her standards. And it got to a point where I felt like I was a slave in my own home, busting my ass for no avail. And it just got to a point where I'm like, why am I constantly being the only one that ever does anything around here or is ever asked? And honestly, let's see something here. There we go. And quite frankly, it got to a point where I cut her out of my life. And I did the same exact thing with my father. I got tired of being treated like trash in my own home, constantly feeling like I wasn't good enough. There were times that I didn't want to be alive. Where my self-confidence was at an all-time low. Sorry. I guess you could say that somehow God knew that I really needed really good mentors. I don't regret a thing. I didn't have a choice but to cut them out of my life anymore. I was tired of feeling like I was trash. Sorry. I knew this part was gonna suck. It took me several months after understanding them to move on a little bit. I had originally left my dad's stepmom's house to go move to Miami for this exact same reason. So much so that when I did move out, I wrote them a letter. And I said, I see the broken people that you are that didn't heal their childhoods. He comes from a very abusive family, and so does she. It's actually so does my mom, ironically enough. And I said, it's a choice. If you don't stop treating me like trash, I will cut you out of my life. Didn't work out in Miami, moved back into their house, and I still was getting treated like trash, and I still had a lot of responsibility. And I just remember the one argument I remember her blatantly just looking at him and saying, "It's me or her." And I said, "Don't sacrifice her. I'll go." And after I moved out, she told me, no, the day before actually I moved out, again to go live in my brother's house, ironically enough. Um, she told me, "Don't write a letter again." I said, "This probably will be the last time you ever talk to me." And it was. And actually, that would be, and the day of which I'm recording this, which would be March 12th, 2026, April 1st, 2025 would be the last day that I ever talked to her. So it's almost been a year. And it's been a very peaceful one. Constantly not hearing that I'm trash and fucking up all the time. So before I moved home to New Jersey, I went to go live in my brother's house. So my brother had broken up with his girlfriend. Fine. And I said, "You need someone to take care of your dog," because he has a dog. And my brother works for a police department in Florida. My brother's a cop in Florida. I'm not going to say where. And he said, "Okay, move in, pay rent, and take care of the dog while I go to work, and you can get out of their house that you get treated like trash." And I was like, "Okay, well, this basically fits." That didn't last long. That lasted about 3 months. The reason why I left Florida was because my brother put his hands on me. In the time that I spent living at my brother's house, my brother threatened to kick the shit out of me multiple different times over petty arguments. To no avail, um, screaming at me was already triggering enough, but I remember the last straw was this stupid steam mop breaking, and I tried to fix it, and I gave him $100 to go buy a new one because I just couldn't fix it. The motor was fried. And I gave him an attitude, and I said, "I'm like, I already bought a new one." And it showed up at the front door the next day after this said argument. And he's like, we got in a massive argument, and that's when he put his hands on me. He literally got in front of my face. So I packed my shit and I left. And I actually packed my car. I said, "I'm done." Called all my friends in Florida. I said, "I'm moving out of the state." And I'm like, I don't know ever if ever I will ever move back or if I'll even buy property in Florida to invest in. I moved home to my home state, which is where I'm currently. In all the years in which I suffered abuse at the hands of my own family, there's a lot of pain that I suffered. Days that sometimes I just didn't want to get out of bed. And I was tired of fighting. Exhausted, really. Sorry. Took me several months not to wish them bad anymore. To look at them for the human beings that they really are. That all of us are broken from broken people. And that's how a lot of human beings become. Broken by broken people. And no, it's not fair. But it is what it is. And through all my trials and times that I wanted to give up and not be here anymore. In my very, very young life, I think I understand more compassion than anything. That insecure people hurt and make insecure people. I think my stepmom and father are perfect byproducts of said topic. In the midst of going through everything is actually how I found God as well. I had, like I said, been in a church to start a business as well. And I always knew God was real, even like going through school, because I went to Catholic school, ironically enough, from sixth to eighth grade. But um, this time around, and getting completely sober and no drugs, no, like, not that I ever did drugs, to be real, but no alcohol, no vaping at all. It was required when I lost everything. Family, finances, you fucking name it, I lost it. And from the midst of those hardships, I was still able to find the peace that only He provides and the safety and security that only He provides as well. Which leads me up to where I am now, getting confirmed in May of 2026. My faith journey was very, probably more normal than probably a lot of people. Like, I still knew, like, I had achieved what is the Protestants would call deliverance, but I was still living in a very worldly way and not living by the standard of the Bible. And it makes you lost because your eyes are focused on something that has nothing to do with your actual growth as a human being. And quite frankly, I learned that I cannot do this on my own as much as I thought I could. I think that's the biggest thing I've learned from finding God in my life, in my own life, is that doing this on your own sucks. And no one should have to do this on your own because entrepreneurship is really fucking hard. And everybody loves to sit here and glamorize it, and no one absolutely should because the first few years are literally trash. But they don't suck as bad when you do have Jesus, for real. And I learned that very quickly. And it got to a point where even this year of 2026, I walked into this year, I said, I'm tired of being a control freak and I don't want anything to do with being a control freak. So you can have it all. I'm tired. You do it. And he has so far. And that's actually how this podcast got created. Is back in also in 2025, I was already thinking about building a podcast. Been talking to somebody about building something. And I knew I wanted the podcast to mean something. And I didn't want to build a podcast just for the sake of having lead gen, which I'll get into that in a minute. But I wanted the podcast to be where people could come share their stories and their insights and all the lessons that they've learned and potentially help somebody like myself who really needed somebody to believe in them because I didn't have that. The one thing that stayed consistent with me throughout all the shitty times in my life was I didn't switch up for selling my soul or selling out to people. I remained the same person and consistent. That I would never ever intentionally ever try to fuck somebody over to cause harm when people did the opposite to me. And sure, I've made my own independent mistakes. Nobody's perfect. But the pain in which I had to endure built beautiful things out of it. And I'm very proud of what I built. I watched my father build a business out of survival mode. And quite frankly, I decided not to. And I said to myself, if I'm going to build anything meaningful, it's going to be on God's timing, not mine. And quite frankly, I had to learn that I can't just force stuff. I realized in the midst of all the pain that people will always do fucked up shit to get ahead. But if you can remain consistent and still be authentically you, there is reward. It's the very reason why this podcast is called Unbreakable, was because through all the challenging times, I still remained firm in what I believed in and who I was as a person, where I would never sacrifice my integrity to get ahead, or never sell my soul and sell out just to fuck somebody over to get ahead. It's not who I am. It's not what I believe in, and certainly not what I built my company's morals and principles on. The slogan in my company is literally called Writing in Excellence. There's a reason for that. I think my 24-year-old self knew something that I do now, but I didn't know back then, is that the excellence portion comes in when you start realizing that not everybody has your best interest at heart, and it takes a serious individual to build something meaningful and that lasts the test of time. A major lesson that I want everybody to learn from my story is while I didn't have it easy, and some of you may not have it easy either, don't sell out, even if it costs you. And my price was very high. I lost a lot of people along the way. I don't regret a thing because you can't. You don't have any regrets when you've been consistent. People don't define your morality. You do. And what you believe in and what you're willing to stand for. And that is why that this podcast too isn't made for lead generation. It isn't made for me to get clients. It's not made for me to get lots of listeners. It's meant for somebody that may try to kill themselves tonight. That they find something that they can hear somebody say, it's you're not too far gone. That I have hope for you. That I believe in you. That you're worth it. The things that I wish I had way back in the day when no one gave a fuck about me. I had to do a lot of things on my own before I was ever prepared for them. And quite frankly, it builds a lot of people that are so fucking lonely and isolated in a world where it's already broken enough. We have a damaged society because we keep allowing people to act like fucking assholes. When are we going to stop this? Quite frankly, not that I try to make anybody cry, let alone make myself cry through all the pain. I learned about a lot of what I needed that I didn't know I needed because I wasn't allowed to have an opinion about what I needed. At the first time in 20, like in literally 26 years of me breathing, I have learned to put myself first. Up here and in here. Because if you don't know what you need, how are you going to help others? And someone recommended me to do this and said that I was ready when this episode terrified the shit out of me to make. Because we're all told, don't put your dirty laundry out there for anybody, right? Keep your all your baggage to yourself. When that's not what anybody should be doing because you have no idea who needs to hear your story so they can really realize the hope and aspirations they have for themselves to get themselves to the next level. That is the goal. Not lead generation, not views, not clicks, not likes, none of that bullshit. The podcast will always remain a safe space for someone who is absolutely dying on the inside to find it and to get some fucking light back in a world where we are all fucking broken, quite frankly. And the mission will always remain the same: make incredible content that helps someone. I didn't get a choice in my journey. And I grew up isolated as a kid, going through incredible familial dysfunction and trauma and being bullied. And at points that life tried to break me, quite frankly. And I'm in a season where I'm building something that should far outlead me. So, the final thing I'm going to say is this: if you're suicidal, like I was, or if you're in a season of rebuilding and you feel like this very shitty chapter will not come to an end, it will. It does end. The pain does end at some point. And know that you're not alone. Don't feel like that for a minute. That you are. Because I wouldn't wish the isolation that I felt for years on anyone. That your story and your journey do matter. Oof. That from the ashes you do rise. Even when people are cruel. And the world just keeps giving you really shitty cards. And I hope, and I really, really, really do pray that when you do watch this, that you remember to be kind to somebody. Because no one should have to ever grow up the way I did. Literally fucking alone and suffering on the inside. And too much of a coward to say that I needed help. And when everything fell apart, that's when I finally realized you can't do it on your own. So if you're watching this all the way till this point, Just know that I'm rooting for you. And I'll see you on the other side of the tunnel, where a rainbow is and a really, really nice beach is.